Hey friends, Barky Dog here, back with another movie review. This time, we're taking a look at two pictures involved in a movie duel. This is what happens when two studios come up with a similar story that goes into production around the same time. Most often, it's an accident, but it could also be accidentally on purpose, if you know what I mean. Then one studio or the other has to try and release their picture first to sort of take the high ground. This happens from time to time, although it's fairly rare because it ultimately costs both studios potential box office revenue. The only other recent occurrence I can think of was the dueling Christopher Columbus movies. There was 1492 and another Columbus picture that both came out around the same time. In this case, though, we're talking about Mission to Mars and Red Planet, both being released in 2000. Mars was in the news. People were talking about what the future may hold, and so both productions were greenlit and wound up in a movie duel. Both movies are about a flight to Mars. A catastrophic accident happens that puts the crew in peril. Astronauts are stranded on the surface, and there's a mystery to solve before time runs out. The first out of the gate was Mission to Mars, released in March of 2000. This was directed by Brian De Palma, his last big Hollywood outing. The movie stars Gary Sinise, Tim Robbins, Jerry O'Connell, Connie Nielsen, and Don Cheadle, with the cameo by Kim Delaney. Unfortunately, the movie dates itself right off as being set in 2020, a very unrealistic goal for any of this stuff, as we know. Gary Sinise is a sad astronaut. He and his wife trained for 12 years for the first Mars flight, but she died, and he hasn't gotten over it. Another couple is sent in their place, as NASA figures having at least one married couple on board would tend to give the crew stability. And then they discover something on Mars. Literally, a face. Like this, but real. This thing is just a hilltop that looks like a face. Kind of like when people see Jesus on a piece of toast or something. But this is a real face, and they trigger some kind of defense mechanism that kills the crew, except for Cheadle's character. But then his radio conks out, and they have no more contact with Mars. Sinise, O'Connell, and married couple Tim Robbins and Connie Nielsen are on Mars 2, a rescue mission to figure out what happened. Red Planet came out later in the same year, in November. It was originally also slated for a March release, but the studio blinked, and it got pushed back twice. Val Kilmer stars along with Carrie-Anne Moss, Tom Sizemore, and General Zod himself, Terrence Stamp. In this one, the Earth's atmosphere is getting too polluted, so there's an attempt to terraform Mars. To do this, they say, but don't show, they detonated low-yield nukes to melt the polar cap and release a lot of CO2. And at the same time, they seeded the planet with algae to produce oxygen and make Mars habitable. None of this is scientifically plausible, but whatever. This is the first manned mission to the planet to see how things are going, but they discover all of the algae is gone. Then there's a massive solar flare and the ship is damaged. The crew, minus Moss, has to abandon ship and get to the surface ahead of schedule. Moss stays behind to try and repair the ship. The mystery of what happened to the algae and why there's oxygen when the algae isn't there to produce it is a central part of the story from there. Meanwhile, They have a robot with them that was damaged in the crash landing, and this thing is supposed to help in mapping and exploration. But it has a military mode for some reason. And it malfunctions. Of course. And it starts killing people. All of these movies have things to recommend them. In Red Planet, fire aboard a spacecraft is depicted in a very realistic way, and they have a shield room to protect the crew from solar flares, something real Mars-tronauts would need on such a mission. Carrie-Anne Moss is great in this role as the mission commander, a real depiction of a strong female character. Unlike this idiot. I also like General Zod, too. His character doesn't get nearly enough screen time for me, but he plays a scientist with a philosophical, almost spiritual bent, which was interesting. And I like Tom Sizemore as the geneticist. His character starts out as very unlikable, but he really grew on me, and I was rooting for him towards the end. The action's good, too. Mission to Mars has a more believable spacecraft. The interactions between the husband and wife, again, a good portrayal of a strong female character, are realistic and have an authenticity to them. Jerry O'Connell and Don Cheadle are both very good in support. The tech is familiar and looks like what they'd have on a real Mars flight, and the astronauts have a camaraderie that is very natural and reminiscent of the way the Gemini and Apollo crews were friendly rivals. So, both have good casts, good direction, interesting characters, an engaging mystery to solve, good special effects. Both productions consulted with NASA about the future of Mars flights, and Mars itself looks equally realistic in both pictures, probably because parts for each were shot in the same location, a desert area in Jordan where they made Lawrence of Arabia. Both also have problems. The alien thing in Mission to Mars is a bit much, and the ending is a little dopey. They also fall back on the trope of an astronaut instantly dying when he opens his helmet in space, something that would actually take a lot longer. At least he didn't explode, so there's that. There's also a sort of EMP that knocks out the Mars base's radio and affects a satellite, but other gear still works, like their rover and spacesuits, and the base appears to still have some power. So I guess this guy couldn't cobble together a radio? I don't know. Meanwhile, Red Planet uses an opening and closing narration to rush things along, and the movie relies on a string of coincidences to drive the story. They have to reach this habitat, which was mysteriously destroyed, so then they have to make it to an old rover to cannibalize parts to make a radio that somehow works, even though it's using a frequency that no one would be listening to and has no dish antenna to send a signal all that way to Earth. Then they need to go to another old spaceship that quit, and they have to modify it to use it as an escape vehicle. All of these things are within walking distance. Well, you get the idea. This one takes place in 2056. Even so, I found the tech much too futuristic. The helmets on the spacesuits have visors made out of some kind of solid energy? Also, the spacecraft is kind of palatial, and that size and scale are not very realistic even today in 2021. Plus, it's all CGI, which kind of looks like CGI. So, on balance, all things considered, these two movies wind up being about the same, kind of equal. So it turns out this is one duel that turned out to be a draw. But I guess. If you held a phaser to my head, I'd have to give the edge to Mission to Mars. The spacecraft looks better, the human interactions are much more realistic, and overall, despite the alien thing, it's a little more believable for the most part. Still, while Red Planet has the somewhat dated CGI and the killer robot, the movie is exciting and has the better mystery. It all depends on what you want. A laid-back action movie or a movie more centered on personal interactions. I'm giving both of these 2.5 paws. Both pictures are better than you maybe heard or remember, and both could have been better, albeit in different ways. Mission to Mars and Red Planet are available on DVD, Blu-ray, and digitally from Amazon Prime. Well, that's all I have for you this time. I'll be back soon with another video. In the meantime, you take care of yourselves, okay? And I'll see you in the next one.